Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown back with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 82 Hendricks versus Thompson. Starting off with my recap of the last event, 7 for 13, 1926 for the event, and that bumped me up to 1,199 overall. That's good. I was at like 2,000 before that, so got me a lot closer to the top, which is where I want to be. But I'll scroll through my picks here quickly. That was a really embarrassing performance by Bader. I don't know why people thought he had a chance to win a decision even. I mean, even if it got out of the first round, I was saying Johnson would have won the decision anyways. But I called Johnson by first round knockout. Rothwell surprised me. I thought he could capitalize on an opening like that, but I thought he would capitalize via knockout. I did not see him pulling off that submission that he got against Mitrione against Barnett. So that was a big win. Northcutt, I said it was going to be a tough fight. Still thought he would win. Obviously very wrong there. Heiss, I got some comments about that one after the fact, and that's one pick I'm happy about. Pretty much went down the way I said it would. I just thought that Heiss would have the better grappling, and he proved that was the case. All right. So, UFC Fight Night 82, Hendricks versus Thompson. You have to commend the UFC here. They absolutely did the right thing. They've never done this before. 151, they canceled it. 177, I believe, that was supposed to be the Dillashaw-Barao rematch. And you can go back and watch my predictions video for that event, but I was saying there, Barao fell out, Soto stepped in, it was like night of the weigh-ins, the night before the event. They should have canceled that thing or made that a free event, and they've had a ton of other just really weak events in the last couple of years, but when something like that happens, the main event falls out. Don't treat your fans like they're stupid. No one wants to pay $50 for that. They absolutely did the right thing making it free. And probably hurt them for sure. They probably incurred some costs there and they lost money on it. They could have canceled it, but it was the right thing to do. Putting it on TV. Really happy with the UFC there finally. Doing their fans a service instead of a disservice like they usually do. So, good for them. As far as the card goes, main event is really the only thing I'm looking forward to here. There's a lot of filler, some good matchups, a few good matchups on the rest of the card, but we're kind of hitting a slog now after 194, after 195. To start off the year, and also Cruz versus Dillashaw, a really strong main event. After that, the last Fox event was kind of garbage, and this one's a lot of filler. And then we have Cerrone versus Means. Actually, Means just fell out. Just found out today. Hopefully Cerrone stays on that card. That's one that if they can't keep Cerrone on that card, with a decent opponent, cancel that thing. That one, was this Fight Pass or free TV? They can't do much with that one. It's already, not a pay-per-view, but, there's a lot of filler coming up is my point. Silva versus Bisping, fine with the main event, but other than that, a garbage card. The UFC still has some work to do. They had the really big weekend with 194, Aldo versus McGregor with those three events. Having a ton of events, a ton of fights in one stretch like that, that's okay. That works. But just imagine if they took Cerrone Means, they took Hendricks Thompson, Silva Bisping. They gave you one really strong card instead of these 3 cards stuffed with filler. They give you one card in between. The last big event, Cruz versus Dillashaw. They give you one card with all those great fights, and then nothing else until McGregor versus Dos Anjos. Imagine the anticipation for that event. That would be big. I think that would really benefit them financially. I don't know why they don't do that, but there's a lot of filler coming up. Anyways, sorry. Let's get back to Fight Night 82. All right, so starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at featherweight, Artem Lobov versus Alex White. The return of the Hammer. I think he's going to win. I was really impressed with him on The Ultimate Fighter. That was a horrible season, but he was the one kind of bright spot of that show. Had a really unorthodox movement style. I thought I was watching Anderson Silva at times. He would just keep his hands down, and I thought he would he would that would cost him at some point. But he was extremely hard to hit for his opponents on tough at least, and he can hit without being hit, and he has big power, a really funky rhythm. I think Alex White's going to play right into his hands, who has power himself, but we saw against Lucas Martins, his striking is very basic. He lacks technique. Also lost to Clay Collard. I think Lobov is going to get another big first-round finish here, first-round knockout, despite him being exposed on the ground in his last fight against Hall. So going with Lobov for the first-round finish. Next up, at welterweight, Mickey Gall versus Mike Jackson. I have no idea who these guys are. I know Mickey Gall is going to fight CM Punk if he wins, but frankly, I don't really care at all. So moving on to the Fox Sports 1 card at featherweight, Noad Lahat versus Diego Rivas. I think Lahat is the safe pick here. He's just more experienced. He's fought some actual guys in the UFC, whereas Rivas is coming off of Tough Latin America the first season. I don't remember who he fought in the house, but I do remember he lost his fight, I think. Actually, he might have won it now that I'm... I think he fought Freddie Serrano, didn't he? And Serrano got robbed, should have won that fight. I can't remember exactly. I think that's what happened. But anyways, other than that, has only had one fight in the UFC against a castmate from Tough. That was Rodolfo Rubio, who was a very raw, another really inexperienced fighter. And Lahat had the win over Seiler. Got the win over Nicholas Backstrom in his last fight, which I thought he could have lost. And his first fight fought Godofredo Pepe. So he's just more experienced. Has fought better guys than Rivas at the UFC level. And he has some grappling, some wrestling, some striking. Doesn't really make an impression on me with any of his skills. But I think that's enough to get by Rivas. So I'm taking Lahat. Next up at flyweight, Ray Borg versus Justin Scoggins. This is the best fight, the most compelling fight on the card, other than Hendricks versus Thompson, definitely for sure. Really underrated fight here. And I think Ray Borg, I've been saying this for a while, this guy is your dark horse contender at flyweight. I really believe that. He hasn't been fighting really top competition at all, but give him a few years. I know everyone is behind Cejudo, but I think Ray Borg is really the guy who could potentially, actually get something done against Demetrius Johnson, just because he is so strong on the ground. He's not a big guy, Obviously, he's a flyweight, but he's not like a really well muscled guy or anything, but he is a strong positional grappler when he gets on top. That Kimura he finished Kalades with was really impressive. But yeah, I have to take Borg here. Scoggins, I think, is a guy. I kind of see his UFC career analogous to Sergio Pettis' career. A young guy who they brought in real early, they thought could really move through the division quickly, but Scoggins just seems like he's kind of stagnated, hasn't been making big improvements in his fights. He was looking good against John Moraga, which was probably the biggest name opponent he fought. Got submitted with a guillotine off of his own takedown attempts after Moraga had been attempting that over and over again. So he's still prone to making mistakes like that, mental lapses. And then his last fight against Josh Sampo was really conservative. I thought he held back and just wasn't a dominant enough performance to, really prove that he's going to continue to rise through the ranks. He's just kind of where he is. He has some talent everywhere. With the wrestling. He had Ortiz in an armbar in their fight. I actually thought he won that fight, but it was really close. And striking, he's another one of these kind of new breed movement guys. Has a bit of an unorthodox style. He uses a karate stance. But Ray Borg has been far more dominant in his fights. Really strong grappler, has submissions, very fast, and he has a great shot too. So I'm definitely taking Borg here. I just think he has a more straightforward game plan. He's going to want to wrestle and get it to the ground, and while Scoggins is crafty and slippery on the ground, I think Borg's just going to be too strong of a grappler for him. So I'm definitely taking Borg here. All right, next up at heavyweight, Derek Lewis versus Damian Grabowski, newcomer. I don't know him, so I can't make a pick. But if Grabowski has any kind of hype behind him at all, really, if he is a decently skilled fighter with some power or with some wrestling, I think Lewis could lose this fight. Lewis has insane power. A physical force, but his wins in the UFC are over bums, to be honest. Ruin Potts, Victor Pesta, and he was losing that fight, by the way, didn't get the finish until the third round, and Guto in a cinch. So that's it. Lost to Mitrione and Jordan in dominant fashion. So Derek Lewis just isn't a skilled guy, Even against Ruin Potts, he had him on his back, was pounding away, and Potts would attempt a really lazy, sloppy heel hook, and that would be enough to scare him off. And I think he even got him to the ground with one of those heel hook attempts. So, Derek Lewis is not a skilled fighter, does have big power, but I just say that if Grabowski has any kind of talent at all, if he's decently skilled, I could definitely see him winning this fight. All right, next up at lightweight, Josh Burkman versus KJ Nunes. Burkman, if you look at what these guys have accomplished over the last several years, I would say Burkman has gotten a lot more done. You look at his WEC or his WSOF fights where he had the knockouts of against Stinson. Really great performance against Fitch where he rocked him on the feet, finished him off with a submission. The knockout of Aaron Simpson. But it seems like that is a thing of the past now. He just seems like he's completely fallen apart. Has not gotten a win since he's been in the UFC. The Lombard fight, he sort of made that competitive, but was still pretty clearly losing the fight the entire time. Duncan Kim submitted him, and then Patrick Cote, that just looked like, that's the fight where I thought he really looked like he had lost a step, and it's evident that he's really starting to decline. Just went out there and just tried to brawl with him and trade with him, no technique, and ate a big punch in the third round that put him out. So seems like he doesn't really have a well-rounded game to fall back on. He's just going out there trying to brawl, and if that's the case, KJ Nunes is the way more technical striker. Maybe doesn't have all the knockouts that Burkman has on his record, but with his boxing background, his karate background, and it's just his MMA striking, he should be a far more skilled defensive striker than Burkman. I think he can avoid those power shots and uses more technical striking. So I'm taking Nunes for a decision here. All right, on to the main card. At welterweight, Mike Pyle versus Sean Spencer. Even though Mike Pyle is really old at this point, he's got to be close to 40. He is 40, which is just extremely old to be fighting, especially at welterweight. The guy is still skilled, and Sean Spencer is not really. Spencer has shown power on occasion, against Cavalcante, against Paulo Thiago, even dropped Alex Garcia, but has not gotten a finish in the UFC, and has not shown any wrestling ability, any grappling ability. He almost got submitted with a scissors choke against Cavalcante. And Pyle's a great grappler. Pyle lost his last fight to Colby Covington. Couldn't deal with the wrestling. I think just couldn't deal with the athleticism or the strength of Covington. But you see some of these other guys, these other young guys that Pyle's put a beating on, like T.J. Waldberger. He just exposes them on the ground, and in the clinch he's nasty. The finishes over James Head and Josh Neer. Sean Spencer's got power, and Pyle's old, and he's suffered some brutal knockouts. Jordan Mean and Matt Brown. Spencer could definitely touch him, but I just haven't seen a well-rounded enough game from Spencer to take him here. Even the fights he's won against Paulo Thiago and Drew Dober haven't been terribly dominant or impressive. I think Pyle can get this to the ground and expose Spencer there, so I definitely have to take Pyle here. I think he could get a finish if he has Spencer on the ground long enough, but to be safe, I'll take him by decision. All right, next up at light heavyweight, Misha Cirkunov versus Alex Nicholson. Misha Cirkunov, I'm having trouble remembering his debut fight against Daniel Jolly, which he won by knockout. I don't remember that finish exactly. If I'm correct, I think he got some nice takedowns in that fight, was controlling him on the ground. I just kind of have a vague memory of him being impressive, but I don't remember the fight too well. It doesn't matter, though. Nicholson is a newcomer, so I wasn't going to make a pick anyway, and we're going to move on. All right, at flyweight, Joseph Benavidez versus Zach Makovsky. I definitely have to take Benavidez here. Not only is he the far more experienced fighter against high-level competition in the UFC, but he just has higher output. He's more aggressive, and Zach Makovsky is more of a stationary fighter. Makovsky will have a way wider array of striking tools in this fight. I think he's going to have a big speed advantage. Makovsky has wrestling. He has a decent jab. I actually thought he should have won the fight against Dodson. I thought he won on points, but that was a pretty uneventful fight. And, he couldn't really kick it into a higher gear in that fight, even against a guy who looked really timid like Dodson. So Benavidez is always really aggressive. He always uses a lot of movement and footwork. I thought he had a really impressive win last time out over Ali Bagautinov. proved that he can still strike with some of the more dangerous strikers in the division. And on the ground, Benavidez is always a threat. Makovsky might have the wrestling edge, but Benavidez is always a threat with that guillotine choke. So I don't think Makovsky can just take him down for all 3 rounds and hold him down. And Benavidez is a hard guy to get a hold of anyways, so I don't really see that happening. And on the feet, I just see Benavidez having a big speed advantage, a big footwork advantage, and just a lot higher output. So I'm definitely taking Benavidez here to win a decision. All right, next up at light heavyweight, Ovince St. Preux versus Rafael Cavalcante. I think taking Cavalcante here would be a very foolish pick. You just can't trust the guy to come in shape, to be consistent. He just looks like he's half-assing it out there. It looks like he doesn't prepare well before fights. Doesn't look like he stays in shape between fights, or even gets in shape for the actual fight. And since coming over from Strikeforce, just hasn't really had a meaningful win. Igor Pokrayets, that's it. And I believe that's his only win. That's his only win in the UFC since coming over in 2012. That's not impressive. He's lost to guys, Thiago Silva, Patrick Cummins in his last fight, and did put up a fight against Cummins, but he should have had a huge skill advantage on the feet in that fight. And Cummins just kept coming forward and knocked him out cold with ground and pound. That was ugly. Cavalcante is a guy who just quits in fights, and there's no way I can take him to beat OSP here. And Cavalcante should have the skill advantage, but OSP is just a bruiser. That fight against Shogun, he proved that he can put you out early in the fight, even though he's he's actually not a technical striker really at all. We saw in that Bader fight, he really doesn't have a jab or any real striking tools. But even with the wrestling, St. Preux's not a great wrestler, but he's so big and athletic that I could see him just closing that distance, getting Cavalcante up against the fence, and just kind of bodying him to the ground. So I have to take OSP here. I think he's going to be way too physical for Cavalcante. He's going to be too athletic and too good shape, and he's got big power. Cavalcante's just been very inconsistent. I'm going with St. Preux here for a finish, definitely. I'd say maybe second round. All right, on to the co-main event, heavyweight Roy Nelson versus Jared Rosholt. This is kind of a sad fight to me. Roy Nelson just hasn't been able to get wins anymore at the high level. He's definitely aging. That knockout loss to Mark Hunt, I think, was really kind of the nail in the coffin. Roy Nelson had ever been knocked out before in the UFC, and he just went down like a ton of bricks. So Roy Nelson, he lets his hands go a lot more than some of the guys Rosholt has been able to wrestle to the ground. I mean, Struve was a complete non-threat on the feet, and it's not like Rosholt. It's not like they weren't on the feet for any time at all in that fight. Rosholt still stood around and was kind of hesitant, got the takedowns eventually, but I think Nelson just lets his hands go way too much for Rosholt to last 3 rounds in this fight. I think it's as simple as that, really. In his last fight against Timothy Johnson, I think Johnson could have easily won that fight if he hadn't been so willing to clinch with Rosholt. Started dropping him in the 3rd round. And it seems in almost every one of Rosholt's fights that he gets dropped or gives his opponent a chance to win. We've already seen him get knocked out by Alexei Olenek, was dropped by Walt Harris in his first fight in the UFC. So I have to go with Nelson. He just, he's going to put a ton of pressure on Rosholt. I mean, Nelson was dropping over him. He tagged Barnett several times, and that's going to be a lot of shots that Rosholt has to withstand. I don't think he can do it. But, if Roy Nelson is out of shape and Rosholt is just so big that he can hold him up against the fence and get him to the ground, and he is a very good wrestler, you have to give him that. Looks like a guy who, is an accomplished college wrestler, and seems like that game is translated perfectly to MMA. If Nelson just comes in and looks like he's completely over the hill in terms of his athleticism and cardio, then I think Rosholt could absolutely steal a win here. Nelson's been out wrestled before. You think of the Frank Mir fight, who is not a good wrestler. But I think it's more likely that Nelson just goes out there to brawl, lets his hands go, and hits Rosholt with something big. Nelson still always has power. So I have to go with Nelson for the knockout. Probably first or second round. Maybe the third round I could see him getting out wrestled the first two, and he comes alive in that third. I don't think Rosholt can deal with that pressure and a guy who's willing to brawl like that. So I have to go with Nelson by knockout. All right, the main event, welterweight Johnny Hendricks versus Stephen Thompson. I think people are they're kind of blowing out of proportion the idea that Hendricks is declining. I will say that I think Hendricks has stagnated, but not declining. For one thing, I don't think he should have ever lost his belt. I mean, that was a pretty close fight, but it's not like he got dominated. It was a close fight, and I thought he won. And after that, came back with a pretty dominant performance against Matt Brown. Seems like he really made it a point to get back to his wrestling almost exclusively. And if he has that approach against Thompson, I think he's going to take down Thompson all night for 5 rounds. Thompson, for being a guy coming from karate, has done really well in the UFC, but hasn't had to fight a guy with the wrestling accolades that Hendricks has. And if Hendricks doesn't want to play around on the feet and just use his wrestling, I think he can play that game easily. If he can do that to Matt Brown, I think he can do it to Thompson. Thompson from distance is probably a lot more dangerous than Brown, but in the clinch, Brown's dangerous, and you saw that in that fight. He was getting Hendricks uncomfortable on the feet. But every time that Hendricks started to falter on the feet, he just went right back to his wrestling. Short story is, I think Hendricks wins with his wrestling, and especially a lean Hendricks after having that really embarrassing disaster happen in his last fight when he was supposed to fight Woodley, not being able to make weight, getting really sick from the weight cut. That was a pretty embarrassing thing to have happen. He says he's lean. He's been posting pictures. I believe it. A lean Hendricks going against a guy who's never had to fight a top wrestler in the UFC. I think he takes him down all day. And another thing, I don't think Hendricks is, a fish out of water on the feet, really. I don't think we're going to see any more knockouts from Hendricks in his UFC career. I think that's definitely a thing of the past. And what he's gained from sacrificing power is, being a more methodical striker, but effective with, putting together boxing combinations. You saw in the second Lawler fight, he didn't want to brawl like he did the first time, and it was in the second or third round, he was putting some good combinations together, had Lawler confused and frozen on the feet. I was able to drive him back with some combinations. Hendricks has become a lot better kickboxer. He has had to sacrifice his power, but I don't think it's really crazy to say that Hendricks can't strike at all with Thompson. Thompson was still dropped by Ellenberger in their fight. Cote was able to pretty much stay on the feet with him. Didn't get much done, but Hendricks or Thompson didn't hurt him either. So Hendricks can strike. Now, where I think Hendricks could really get himself in trouble, and I definitely see if Thompson wins, I definitely see this being the way he does it. If Hendricks starts to fade late in the fight, if his cardio is not, if his cardio problems are not fixed, like how he started to gas in the second Lawler fight at the end, and just basically hanging onto his legs and falling to his knees, putting his head right in between Lawler's legs, and not even having any strength to attempt the takedown, and basically giving away the positional advantage. If he starts doing stuff like that, just completely giving up late, starts to get really sloppy on the feet, and if his cardio just wanes, then I think Thompson could really pour it on, and that's where Thompson's creative striking and power could really be a big threat to Hendricks. Is late in the fight, if Hendricks starts getting sloppy, he starts losing his speed, and he becomes slow, then I think he's a dead man standing at that point. But overall, Hendricks should just have the wrestling advantage. I think he's really taking his weight seriously this time. And, remember, Thompson's a guy who got out-grappled by Matt Brown. And I know that was a long time ago, but hasn't faced a top grappler since then. He really hasn't. He's had some very impressive performances against good strikers. The Robert Whittaker knockout was really impressive, and we all know how great Whittaker's doing now. And then the fight with Jake Ellenberger, that wheel kick was very impressive, but hasn't fought a hard-nosed, gritty wrestler, and that's what Hendricks is. So definitely have to go with Hendricks for the decision. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 82, Hendricks versus Thompson. Thank you for watching. Follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. I'll be live tweeting during the fights. And enjoy the fights. Enjoy the Super Bowl. If I have to make a prediction, sadly, I have to go with the Panthers. I just think, as much as I love Peyton Manning and I want the Broncos to win, and I really, I respect Peyton Manning. Definitely is one of the best quarterbacks, players ever. Peyton Manning just, he chokes in the Super Bowl. He doesn't show up. Seattle 2 years ago, he scored did they even score a touchdown in that game? Maybe one. And then several years before that against the Saints, it was another kind of both losses were shutouts pretty much. So I don't think the Broncos get it done this time. I would love them to win. I'm rooting for them, but the Panthers just have too much offense, so have to go with the Panthers if I'm picking with my head. But all right, guys, take care. I'll see you next time. I'll see you soon for Fight Night 83, Cerrone versus TBA. See ya.